Welcome to Arirang TV's special coverage of COVID-19. I'm Min San-hee. We start on a rather somber note today as Korea has recorded more than 100 infections overnight. Most are centered in the Greater Seoul area, and accordingly, authorities are looking to raise the level of social distancing to further curb the spread. We start the program now with more on the latest numbers with our Kwon So-ah and related news with our Oh Jung-hee. So, do tell us more about the dramatic surge in cases here in the country.
Yes, Sunny, as you mentioned, more than 100 cases have occurred here in Korea today, and most of them were in the capital region, traced to cluster infections, to small churches, a fast food franchise, traditional markets, door-to-door businesses, and more.
Right, which is exactly why the government is mulling over stronger social distancing measures.
Right, we might hear more on that in our later afternoon briefing, but earlier in the morning, health authorities said they are reviewing whether to raise the social distancing level to level 2 in the capital Seoul and nearby Gyeonggi-do province. So with that, let's take a look at how serious the figure looks today. We have 103 new cases, and 85 of those were local infections with 18 imported cases. That raises our total to 14,873. The death toll remains unchanged since the past few days at 305. We have 705 people in quarantine with 57 added here and 46 new recoveries. Now the total there at 13,863. If we go over to our graph now, we do see clearly we have a surge here. We had 50s in the past 2 days. Now even the double figure, and above 100 is what we saw 20 days ago. But back then it was when we had hundreds of South Korean nationals returning from Iraq and a cluster infection related to a Russian ship. So the bigger concern is that 85 cases out of these 103 are local infections, and that high, the highest number we had before was at the end of May. And if we go over to our map now, clearly we see that the metropolitan region has been affected most. Let's get into the details of the local infections, as we have 31 local infections in the capital Seoul and 38 in Gyeonggi-do province, which are local infections, and also many more cases here sporadically in many other cities and provinces. The concern is that although these numbers here are not that high, these are also mostly local infections, and we know that these can spread to further chain transmissions. And let's take a look at our global figures now. We have a total of 21 million cases now, with over 284,000 added in the span of 24 hours. And the death toll stands at over 753,000, and we have 13.9 million recoveries. And let's take a look at which countries have been hit hardest. The US at 5.4 million, followed by Brazil at 3.2 million. These are seeing cases, daily cases at above 55,000, while India is seeing more than 64,000 cases in the span of a day. And Peru, meanwhile, has surpassed the 500,000 mark. And not looking much better in Mexico, also at 505,000, and also other Latin American countries, as that continent is still the epicenter of the virus. And these are the updates I have for now, but I'll be back after our government briefing. Back to Sunny.
Right, so I'll see you back with more on the domestic updates. Now, despite the disturbing trend with regard to daily infection numbers, those related to the economy appear to be less distressing. The OECD believes Korea will outperform its global counterparts with the smallest contraction in its economy. I have our Oh Jung-hee with details on that. Hello, Jung-hee.
Good afternoon.
Jung-hee, now do tell us about the OECD's most recent report on the 2020 growth outlook, which I understand was released earlier this week.
Right, Sunny. The OECD expects the Korean economy to be least affected by the global COVID-19 pandemic among all member states. Now, it raised its forecast on Korea's economic growth this year from the previous minus 1.2% forecast in June to minus 0.8%. That is the smallest contraction among the 37 OECD member states. The OECD says Korea managed to minimize the economic fallout of COVID-19 COVID-19 through its quick and effective response to the pandemic without imposing any lockdowns or shutting down borders. Take a listen to what President Moon Jae-in had to say about that.
국민들께서 방역의 주체가 되어주신 덕분에 우리는 국경과 지역 봉쇄 없이 방역에서 가장 성공한 모범 국가가 되어 OECD 37개국 중 올해 경제 성장률 1위로 예상될 만큼 가장 선망하는 나라로 평가받고 있습니다.
Right, Chong-yu, what is the significance of the latest OECD report then?
Sonny, what we have to note is that Korea is the only country within the OECD that the OECD has made an upward revision in its growth forecast for this year. So if we look at the graph on the screen, the country that's expected to be second least affected by the global COVID-19 is Turkey, whose economy is forecast to shrink 4.8%. So the gap between Turkey and South Korea is still big, and we can safely say that Korea's economy is expected to far outperform all other OECD nations. Taking a look at some of the major economies across the globe, the OECD forecasts Japan's economy to fall 6%, Germany by 6.6%, the US by 7.3%, and the UK by 11.5%. Now, in terms of nominal GDP, the OECD expects Seoul to move 3 notches up from the 12th largest economy to 9th this year among 37 members and 9 non-members. Korea is projected to move past Brazil, Canada, and Russia, the countries that were all hit harder than Korea by the pandemic.
I see. Now, I understand the OECD report also touched upon Korea's New Deal initiative. Please tell us more.
Right. Mind you, the recently announced Korean New Deal initiative is comprised of 2 key pillars, digital and green. Now, this initiative aims to promote 5G telecommunication network, artificial intelligence, non-contact industries, as well as renewable energy, and also aims to create smart and green industrial complexes and factories. It is the OECD's view that Korea is a leading country in digital technologies, in fact, one of the world's top 5 contributors. It said that the Korean New Deal initiative will help support a green and inclusive recovery process, and the government's growing support for the transition towards renewable energy and clean technologies would act as physical multipliers and strengthen the second phase of the recovery process.
That is good to know. Chong-yu, the organization also had some policy recommendations for Seoul, I hear.
Right. I mean, despite all the good news that we have, the OECD actually said that though the Korean economy has fared relatively better, the COVID-19 pandemic has still caused a serious recession here in the country. It specifically pointed out that South Korea's leisure and tourism, manufacturing, petrochemicals, and automobile sectors have all taken a significant hit, and massive job losses have occurred. The organization recommends Seoul to strengthen protection measures for non-regular workers and also bolster its social security net while raising the overall quality of jobs. The agency also says Seoul has to actively make use of its regulatory sandbox to eventually remove unnecessary or excessive regulations and facilitate new technology like telemedicine, for example. But overall, the recommendations go in line with what Korea aims to achieve through its Korean New Deal initiative. So I guess we'll have to first wait and see how things play out in the future.
All right, Chong-yu, as always, thank you for the wrap-up of the economic matters amid the pandemic. Hope to see you again soon.
My pleasure.
Right, we turn now to the regular afternoon briefing on COVID-19. The number of daily infections has jumped to a 4-month high. On this Friday, Korea recorded 103 new cases, with 85 of them local transmissions. Now, the number of locally transmitted cases is the largest since March 31st, when the country saw 88 domestic infections. In response to this latest reality, Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun earlier on this Friday revealed the possibility of toughening prevention measures to level 2 in the metropolitan area. Back in June, Korea adopted a 3-tier social distancing plan under which Korea is currently at level 1. Under level 2, all private and public indoor meetings of 50 or more people and outdoor gatherings of more than 100 are banned. Meanwhile, given the growing numbers of infections that cannot be traced, officials are advising people to refrain from gatherings that can be avoided, including those simply for social distancing purposes. Health authorities have also shared some alternatives to dining at large-scale events, including weddings, suggesting the option of handing out gifts of gratitude to guests who attend. Now, as we continue to wait for that briefing to commence, perhaps we can take a look at the daily life quarantine measures recommended by the government. We have yet to see those measures on the screen. Right, actually, we'll take a look at the guidelines given for those in temporary shelter amid the torrential downpour here in the country. While you are in those makeshift shelters, those displaced are being asked to wear their masks when entering these shelters and to keep wearing them if possible when they're inside them too. Keep your distance from those around you to ensure your health and the health of those around you. And also do remember to drink boiled water or mineral water, or to cook water if you cannot boil it, that is, if you have no access to mineral water. Do wash your hands frequently, as authorities have claimed that hand hygiene is as important as the wearing of face masks amid the pandemic. Also remember to ventilate the area at least twice a day if possible. Now, we're still waiting for that briefing to commence, and now we'll take a look at some of the guidelines for those seeking to make most of their remaining holiday. When at the beach, remember to go to areas that are less crowded or those that are less popular. Also, visitors should avoid gathering in large groups and seek to go to the beach in small family units. Beach parasols should be placed at least 2 meters apart, and masks should be worn at all times outside the water. Visitors are also asked not to spit when in the water. Social etiquette is very important, and visitors must register and get their temperatures checked when entering the beach area. Visitors should leave one empty stall between them in shower facilities to ensure, once again, hygiene and safety from those around them and their own health safety, of course. Task forces will be conducting daily inspections on the beaches to make sure that members of the public at these areas are abiding by stringent social distancing measures. We are still waiting for that briefing to start, and while we do, perhaps we can take a look at the numbers for this Friday once again. The daily numbers have raised to 103, raising our total number on this Friday to 14,873. The death toll remains unchanged at 305, while 57 people joined those in quarantine, raising our quarantine numbers to 705. Now, we will still take a look then at the do's and don'ts for the summer vacation. The first thing is, do not travel if you feel yourself under the weather or if you feel sick. Also, for those who are in the Namdaemun area, remember to get yourself tested should you feel that you may have been exposed to the virus. Yet another thing that you're being advised not to do is to enter crowded and congested as well as confined places, given the risk of possible infection, especially if these places have more people than normal. Also, do not engage in physical contact or do not get too close to those around you. Remember to wear a mask when you're speaking to them to ensure, again, your health and the health of those around you. For family members who remain isolated in their homes, do remember to call them to make sure that they're psychologically well as physically healthy. Remember to wear your mask indoors. Mask wearing is as important as hand hygiene, of course. Minimize this time spent in restaurants and express service stations, and also if you are using your phone inside these restaurants, health authorities are calling for you to wear your mask while talking on your cell phones, or to leave the restaurant, to go outside, that is, of the restaurant to take your calls. Do keep at least a 2-meter distance with those around you. Once again, social distancing is of utmost importance during the time of this pandemic. The briefing appears to have been delayed for a bit, which is why we're still waiting for them to start. Again, for the numbers for this Friday, we are concerned. Authorities remain highly concerned here because our infection cases, that is, have been raised by over 100. From that 103, 85 cases are domestic. The domestic infections have been on the rise following outbreaks, sporadic cluster infections, that is, at churches, and that spread to a market here in Seoul. And now we've also had cases at a franchise restaurant here in the metropolitan area as well. Authorities are thinking of toughening prevention measures in the metropolitan area to ensure that the spread does not get more severe. We are currently in level 1 of social distancing measures, but the idea is that the social distancing level may be raised to 2, under which all private and public indoor meetings of 50 or more people will be banned, and outdoor gatherings of 100 will also be banned. The briefing is about to start. We'll come back to you afterwards.
Let us now begin our regular briefing for the COVID-19 situation here in South Korea. As of August 14th, we have 85 new local infections and 18 new imported cases. The total number of confirmed cases now stands at 14,873. 46 more people have been discharged, while 705 people remain in quarantine. There are a total of 14 patients with severe or critical conditions, and we had no additional fatality. First, let us now look at the updates on domestic cases in relation to the meeting of the Seoul Regional Lotteria manager staffs. We have 4 more users being confirmed, and a total of 15 people have been confirmed to date. In relation to Gold Train in Gangnam-gu district, we had the first index case on the 11th of August. We conducted epidemiological investigation. We have confirmed that 3 family members in Namyangju and 5 members of a family in Gwangnam-gu district have been classified under this case, and we have 2 more additional cases being confirmed today, and in total there are 18 cases to date. And in relation to the Tongil market in the Dongdaemun market area, we have the first index case, 2 index cases on the 12th of August. We conducted epidemiological investigation. 2 more family members have been confirmed. In total, we have 4 cases. And in relation to the Sarangjeil Church in Seongbukgu District, Seoul City, we are doing contact tracing. We have 14 additional cases, 12 of which are the members of the church, and we have in total 19 cases to date. And epidemiological investigation shows that during this period, the confirmed cases have been visiting the church, and we ask all of the people who have visited the church during the 7th to 13th of August to get tested, and we are testing them as well. And in relation to the Urijjail Church in Yongin City, Gyeonggi-do Province, a total of 60 people have been confirmed to date, and a total of 70, that is, has been confirmed to date as now. And we have a majority of them are the members of the church. And in relation to the Rejoice Church in Goyang City, we have 1 additional case, and the total now stands at 24. In Gyeonggi-do Yongin City, we have the Daeji High School and Jukjeon High School, and we have 1 additional student being confirmed, and in total we have 9 cases to date. And 5 of them are Jukjeon High School students and 2 family members, and 2 are Daeji High School students. And in relation to a coffee shop in Paju District, we have the first index case on the 10th of August. We have 2 more family members as well, 2 acquaintances being confirmed, and we have confirmed that this coffee shop, which is at the Yadang station in Paju, it's a Starbucks store, and we have additional cases being confirmed, and in total we have a total of 8 cases being confirmed, and we are doing the epidemiological investigation. And in relation to the Busan Haeundaegu District, the National Mechanical Technical High School, we also have 4 additional cases, including the family members as well as contacts, and a total of 7 people have been confirmed, and we are also testing all of those who have come into contact. And next, let us now look at the numbers for the imported cases today. As of today, we have 18 new imported cases. 7 of them have been reported at the points of entry, while the rest 11 have been spotted while on self-quarantine. 6 were South Korean nationals, while 12 were foreigners. And as for the countries, 9 of them were from US, Ghana, 2, and 1 from Algeria, and 1 from Ethiopia, meaning 4 were from Africa, and 1 from Europe, and 2 from Iraq as well. The KCDC is noting that we have cluster infections increasing fast among cluster infections of the religious circles, so we also ask you to take particular precautions during the weekend. And looking at the table in the press release, you can see that we have 7 total clusters at churches and choir meetings, and most of the risk factors were the fact that they did not wear face masks properly. And they did not wear face masks properly, meaning that they did not cover their faces, and they also carried out choir meetings as well as small group meetings and services. They were inside enclosed spaces, eating together and engaging in dialogue. And of course, people had symptoms, however, they also went to the services and they were exposed to the virus there. And the cluster infection spread to the community at a very fast pace, including schools, markets, and offices. So when you are having on-site services, you need to always wear face masks when indoors. And inside these religious facilities, you should refrain from eating together and enjoying snacks together. And before and after the regular services, you shall not meet for regular meetings. And you should also postpone or cancel all of the prayer meetings or summer retreats, or switch them to online alternatives. And if you have symptoms, you shall not go to the services and get tested as soon as possible at a nearby screening clinic. Moreover, if the cluster infections continue going forward, we will have to review our intensified quarantine measures as well as administrative orders. So we ask for the churches to take voluntary means. And we have also noted that some churches did not have a proper keeping log of the visitor entry log, and we also have some of these measures were insufficient, so we ask for your participation. And if you breach these quarantine measures, please remember that you can be subject to severe actions, including compensation and so forth. The KCDC is also noting the fact that there are cluster infections on the religious meetings and small group meetings, and we also highlight that you need to spend you need to keep healthy during the upcoming extended weekends. We have noted that there were some acquaintances meetings in Songpagu district, as well as door-to-door sales and the Lotteria fast food chain restaurant as well. And many of these meetings had meetings, and they also shared food, and they did not wear face masks properly, and there are also high infection rates among the members of the meetings. So remember that there is no specific place which is prone to virus infection. Just the mere action of meeting others other than your family members could increase your risks of infection. So we ask you to refrain from these gatherings and meetings. We are also noting that there is a continuous transmissions and chain transmissions, and during the extended weekend, we ask you to stay on alert, and we will also continue to stay vigilant. Please remember that the COVID-19 spreads fast at crowded, closed, and close contact environments, and this is very important, so you should remember this at all times. And you should also refrain from these 3C environments where the infectious rate is very high, and at the entertainment venues like clubs or bars or cafes or restaurants are also highly prone to a virus infection. So we ask you to refrain from going to the enclosed spaces. And even during your daily routines, when you visit cafes and restaurants, you need to abide by the quarantine measures of wearing face masks, washing your hands, and keeping 2 meters distance. And during the extended weekend, we ask you to refrain from having outdoor meetings and gatherings, and also enjoy your time at home with your family members. And even when you are outside, please enjoy your time outdoors. Today, we have seen 85 new local infections. This is the highest number in about 4 months since last March. And the trends of transmissions have just been doubled in the area of Seoul and the Gyeonggi-do province in just 24 hours. And we also have over 13% of the chain transmissions with unidentified sources of infection. So we believe that this is a very critical moment at the metropolitan areas specifically. And the asymptomatic patients are spreading the virus rapidly through many venues, including churches, large markets, schools, and the daycare centers. And as for the extended weekend that starts tomorrow, and as well as the large rallies that are scheduled for tomorrow, we believe that these will be the occasions for a fast spread and widespread of the virus. So it is very important to note that we need to have the current situation under the manageable capacity of our medical services, and this is at a critical juncture. And the quarantine authorities note that right now, this moment has become as a result of some easing of the quarantine measures and distancing measures and some complacencies among the members of the public. Our COVID-19 successful containment has been possible thanks to the cooperation between the public, the quarantine measures, quarantine authorities, as well as the medical staff. We were able to contain the further virus in the Daegu as well as the early March in the metropolitan area, and we need to always remember by heart to the need to wear our face mask and keep distancing measures. And we need to curb the further virus going forward, and we ask you to also refrain from attending worships at the regular religious services. And we also ask you to refrain from going to mass gatherings and rallies during the weekend, and also refrain from having gatherings and social meetings, and also wear your face mask if you are outside. And the quarantine authorities will also monitor the patients, and we will also try our utmost to monitor the situation. Thank you very much.
Right, that was Chung Young, the head of KCDC, with Friday's afternoon briefing. So you're back with a summary of that briefing.
Yes, the sudden jump in COVID-19 cases to over 100 is raising concerns as it really happened just before the long weekend, the extended weekend. And as you mentioned before, since it's the highest number of local infections we're seeing at 85 cases since March 31st, so even before end of May, which I mentioned earlier in the program. And these cases have now occurred at churches, dozens of new cases, and also the Rotteria, the franchise, the fast food franchise, has 4 additional cases, raising the total to 15. And there are also new cases at high schools, including in Busan, as well as a coffee shop. So it's becoming more and more difficult to keep track of the origins of these sources, which is why the government and the KCDC chief Chung Eun-kyung has asked for extra vigilance, especially now over the weekend, asking for people to refrain from going to church services, rather to attend them online, and also to not go to large-scale rallies. And the government, actually the Seoul metropolitan government, has banned such rallies over this weekend, and even other smaller gatherings. If you can, please do not go to unnecessary gatherings over this extended holiday.
Right, thank you for those words. All right, so I will see you again next week.
See you on Monday.
On Tuesday, that is actually.
Tuesday, yes.
Right. Tomorrow, August 15th, Korea celebrates its liberation from Japan in 1945. And on the same day, in 1948, the government of the Republic of Korea was established. To mark the upcoming occasion, I have our Chun Song-cho with us live from a very meaningful place. Hello, Song-cho.
Good afternoon, Sunny.
Song-cho, do start by telling us where you are.
Yes, so I'm at the Seodaemun Prison History Hall, and as Sunny mentioned just now, tomorrow is August 15th, Liberation Day or Gwangbokjeol, one of the 4 major national holidays here in South Korea. Well, Gwangbokjeol literally translates into the day the light returned in Korean. So on August 15th, we celebrate the restoration of national independence that was lost for 35 years under the Japanese colonial rule from 1910 to 1945. So on the eve of 75th anniversary of Liberation Day, I invite all of you to take a look around here, the place where many Korean independent activists were held, incarcerated, tortured, and executed by the Japanese army. It's such an emotionally charged place here, and you can actually feel the actual ambience of the prison as it was 100 years ago. I mean, you can see these dark lit corridors and tiny little cells and concrete walls. I mean, they just really make me feel the ambience back then, and it flashes images of the brutality and horror that took place here. I mean, it just really highlights an important part of South Korea's painful history. The prison was opened actually in 1908, first designed to just house 500 inmates, but shortly after the March 1st independence movement in 1919, the number of imprisoned activists put behind bars increased drastically to as many as 3,000 at its peak. So you can imagine how unbearable the conditions must have been for people back then. Well, many important figures in Korea's liberation movement were incarcerated here, including Kim Gu, Yu Kwan-soon, and An Chang-ho, and so on. Now, the prison was closed for good in 1987. Then, in 1998, the prison turned into what it is today to educate the future generations on the importance of Korea's independence and the sacrifices of those who fought to gain back what was rightfully theirs. And every year on Liberation Day, scores of people come here and various events take place. But of course, this year, due to COVID-19, well, many of the programs look somewhat different from what they used to be because they have gone digital. So if you want to participate, then you can go on the website and you can partake in challenges via social media. So for instance, you can post comments and post related to about the great works done by Korean independence activists and so on. But what would be even better is if you come to the prison physically yourself, right? Actually, the prison was open to the public again after being closed for over 5 months due to COVID-19. It was reopened on July 22nd. So strict quarantine measures are in place, of course. That includes disinfecting the entire facility twice a day. They're keeping a record of people who goes in and out of the facility, and they're controlling the number of people every single day. Now I know rain is in the forecast for the weekend, so maybe the Seodaemun prison can be one of the many options of outdoor places that you can spend your weekend dry in a meaningful and productive way, right? And actually, as we speak, there is a concert stage being set up outside for a special concert performed by the Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra. So why not come here and pay respect to the fallen heroes over the weekend? This has been Chun Song-cho reporting live from Seodaemun Prison History Hall, and back to you, Sunny, in the studio.
Right, Song-cho, indeed, the place stands as a tangible and visible remnant of Korea's history. Thank you for that coverage. A new normal has been ushered into the working environment amid global efforts to fight COVID-19. Many are working from home. And while some claim that work has been more productive, others believe otherwise. For more, I have our Gov'T from the Korea Labour Institute. Welcome, Dr. Oh.
Glad to see you.
And I also have Seo Yu-jung from the Korea Research Institute for Vocational Education and Training. Hello, Dr.
Hello, thank you for welcoming.
Right, Dr. Oh, please do start by telling us a bit about the impact of COVID-19 on the work environment thus far.
Yeah, I think the COVID-19 had a tremendous effect on the labor market and the working life. Many Korean companies changed their working life to policy like a teleworking or work from home policy. The work from home policy has been tried in many companies, but not that much successful because the traditional face-to-face communication method is more easy to be implemented and then more familiar with the Korean employees. However, due to the COVID-19, now the traditional working method is limited, and then the company and the workers have to find a new working method. Many Korean companies introduced and implemented a variety of the flexible work system. Most of them introduced the teleworking or work from policy and the selective working hours and deemed work system and so on. Some of the Korean companies tried to continue this system after decrease of COVID-19 in Korea due to some performance of work and satisfaction of workers.
I see. Doctor, so as Dr. Oh just mentioned, prior to the pandemic, remote working was not popular in Korea amid concerns over communication and productivity. What is the response to this mode of working within that is the corporate sector now?
Right. I believe cases differ. Some, especially in private sectors, they have done a remarkable job applying the scheme and even managed to maintain their productivity level. So I believe more than half of them are planning to continue with it and believe that it has been very effective maintaining their efficiency and productivity. However, I cannot say the same for the public sectors, unfortunately. We have very conservative managers in public sectors, so even though we had a guideline recommending social distancing, they were still a bit resistant to it. So what happened was that they kind of ended up creating conflicting messaging in the organization and ended up impairing their workers' productivity.
I see. Doctor, what about the workers themselves? Are they satisfied with this mode of working? And if so, what are some of the merits that they choose to highlight?
I think the Korean employees are more likely to be satisfied with the teleworking or work from home policies. Most of our teleworking or the work from home policies would provide a better chance of the work-life balance. During early of this year, when the COVID-19 was relatively active in Korea, the school were closed and then only opened through the online. Most working moms have to take care of their children in that situation, so that the work from home policy would help in that situation to have take care of their children. In addition, teleworking and work from home policy would decrease time and cost associated with teleworking, commuting from home to workplace. The Korean workers spend twice longer commuting time compared to the OECD average. So by saving this time, workers can focus more on their job in their home.
Right, that is very valuable time saved. Doctor, so apart from the difficulties seen in the public sector, generally speaking, on a very broad note, what are some of the benefits that can be seen by the adoption of flexible work hours in the long run?
In the long run. The most obvious ones were already mentioned by Dr. Earl, but the others, I must say in future tense, because they are to come, just not here yet. I believe, well, we'll have a very clear role division and outcome-based performance appraisal, because not everyone will be at work at the same time. So to ensure effective communication and collaboration, everyone needs to know who is doing what and when exactly. So obviously the managers will need to follow up on that quite diligently. Performance appraisal should be based on the output, because they are not at work at 9 to 6. So how can you measure their performance based on that? So yeah, the output-based performance appraisal will become the new norm, as well as the clear work role division.
Right. And while we've touched upon the positive aspects of remote working, there are some negative aspects that have been identified in a study for an American nonprofit research entity by a group of scholars. Now, I have one of the scholars, Evan De Filippis, at Harvard Business School, live on the line. Hello, Evan.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Right, Evan. Now, your study for the National Bureau of Economic Research found that working hours had actually increased while working from home. Please tell us more about your findings and your study, of course.
Sure. So what we did was that we received de-identified data from a provider that offers calendar and email services to companies around the world. So we had data on email and meeting activity for 3.1 million users across 20,000 firms in the world. And what we did was we looked at 16 specific international cities where there was a COVID-related government-mandated lockdown. And we looked at how patterns of email and meeting activity changed before and after those lockdowns. And as you alluded to, what we discovered is that people are working 48 minutes longer each day, and they're also involved in more meetings with more people. But curiously, those meetings also tend to be shorter.
So, Evan, you found that we're working 48 minutes longer from home, and we have an increase in the number of meetings we're holding with people online.
That's right.
Evan, what do you believe are the reasons behind these findings?
Yeah, so we offer a couple speculative explanations in the paper. So one possibility is that the function of meetings has changed in the post-COVID world. So firms might be using meetings as an accountability or a check-in tool to make sure that people are getting work done. And so as a result, meetings have had to become regular and larger to accommodate that fact. Another possibility is that the problems faced by organizations in the post-COVID period might just be more relevant to a greater share of employees in an organization than before COVID. So you need more meetings to ensure that all relevant people have received important information.
I see. Now, Evan, I believe one of our panelists here in the studio has a question for you. I believe that is Dr. Seo.
Yep, that's right. Hey, hi there. Yep.
Hey.
We got some Korean surveys that home working people enjoy higher level of job satisfaction as well as time efficiency, but your paper seems to suggest the contradicting results. So what's your opinion on that?
So I'm not entirely sure these are actually contradictory results. So 2 points here. The first is that although we did find that people are working longer hours and that meetings are more frequent and larger, meetings got shorter as well, substantially shorter. And the effect of that shortening was so large that it actually caused people to be spending less time in meetings overall. So one quality of life improvement that these Korean surveys might be picking up on is the fact that just less time is being spent on what might be unproductive meetings, even though those meetings are more frequent and with more people. But I think a more salient point is that most people just probably prefer working from home, even if it means working longer hours. So working longer hours might be due to the fact that they're spending more time with family or spouses or other priorities throughout the day, and therefore they work longer to compensate for that fact. But as this was alluded to by Dr. Oh, we've also heard stories of people who tell us about their 2-hour-long commutes to and from work, and they would happily work longer hours in exchange for avoiding the stress of getting to work every day. So I think even though people are working longer, they're happy to do so because it means avoiding a lot of the stresses associated with actually getting to work.
I see, within the comfort of their homes, of course. All right, Evan, thank you very much for making the time to join us live with your thoughts.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Right, Dr. How do the findings of the study by Evan and his colleagues compare to the reality here in Korea, where workers on average work longer hours than their counterparts elsewhere around the world?
I think the Korean working system will be a little bit different from the US and the European countries. So it can be true for the US and Europe, but not that much Korean situation. The Korean has second longest working hour after the Mexico, so that we have not that much time to increase. Second, the Korean company have so many offline meetings, but now the online meeting is not that much, so that the total number of the the meeting would be decreased in Korea in pandemic situation. And then Korean government introduced the maximum 52 working hours per week 2 years ago. So that also in fact on the decrease of the working hours. And finally, the many companies have a policy of no overtime recognition in work from home policy, so that the working hours would be a little bit decreased in Korea in pandemic situation.
Right. Doctor, so what are some of the potential pitfalls in the case of a broader adoption of remote working and flexible working hours, do you think?
Right. Okay. Technology-wise, we have been ready even before the coronavirus situation for teleworking. But what we do not quite have yet is being ready to change our attitude and accept the changes. We still have managers who believe workers should be at work at 9 to 6, when we still have workers who consider home working as no work or less work than they should be doing. So what would happen is that the management would lose trust in their employees, and the employees would be unwilling to work hard for the companies who do not trust them. And the management loses even more trust, so a vicious circle is formed and everyone will lose. That's what we should be wary of.
And we should be trying to change our attitude toward remote working as well.
Yes.
Then. Dr. O, the pandemic is looking to cause a permanent shift towards remote working in the future as well. In light of this scenario, what can be done by government officials and perhaps corporate leaders to ensure a smooth transition into the new normal, so to speak?
Yeah, a couple of things. First, the company need to introduce new evaluation and then compensation system, which is more suitable with the new way of working in the pandemic period like COVID-19. Since the working system would be changed from input-based system to output-based system, so that we need the management system to copy with that kind of change. Also, the work management would be done by what workers actually did, rather than how many hours employees worked. So that we need that kind of the change to be managed. And then the mind of workers and then organizational culture of a company need to be adjusted to unpack the working the situation. Now the new work would be done by most of the work would be done by on-tech the master, and then only few important decisions would be done by offline meetings. So the workers need to be learn how to communicate and then interact with each other, and then they also how to arrange and monitor work process. Finally, government has some institutional basis for on-tech working system.
Right. All right, Dr. O, thank you for your thoughts, and Dr. Seo, thank you very much for being with us today.
No problem.
Right, and that brings us to the end of this week's coverage of COVID-19. We'll be back next Tuesday, as I was telling Kwon So-ah, because Monday has been designated a substitute holiday for National Liberation Day, which is tomorrow, that is a Saturday. Now, given the long weekend ahead and the recent rise in local infections here in the metropolitan area, be sure to abide by all safety precautions this weekend. Do take care and have a safe weekend.